So we have a few people joining here. We'll get started in just a moment. Excellent. I see that ticking up as everybody joins in. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us from today. Hello from Toronto. My name is Lindsay Hilcoat, and I'm proud to be representing Seed Global Education. And we'd love to hear a little bit more from where you're joining us from today before we begin our session. So please use the webinar chat function and let us know the city and the country that you're dialing in from. We're also very excited to have our hosts from Bocconi who are joining us from Milan, Italy today. I see Kenya in the chat. From India, can you let us know the cities that you're joining from as well? Delhi, fantastic. Quite a few cities in India. Excellent. Delhi, Jaipur, Bangalore, fantastic. So keep that coming. We've got a new country here, Kigali, Rwanda, from Dubai. Excellent, from all over the world. So we'll just keep that chat going. I see many more people joining us on the session here today. Once again, my name is Lindsay Hilcoat, and I'm representing Seed Global Education, where we facilitate interactions with top universities like our masterclass host today, Bocconi University, and students like yourselves. And in addition to expert masterclasses like today's session, we also host in-person events to help connect you with highly qualified candidates with top schools in India, the Middle East, Africa, and also beginning in 2026, Southeast Asia. So for those of you based in those regions, we do hope to have the opportunity to meet you in your city soon. We also have an impressive scholarship program totaling over $6 million that allows top students to access scholarships from many partner universities, including Bocconi, who also has scholarships that are available for you to check out as you explore their various programs as well. I'm very excited to have Bocconi join us, a leading European institution based in Milan, Italy, who has an impressive suite of graduate programs across fields, including many related to management and leadership. Today's topic is titled Public and Private Bodies in the Green Transition, Challenges and Opportunities. And we're really excited to learn a little bit more about the collaborative roles we have in society that help shape and influence a greener economy. And we have an expert today in that field, Professor Miriam Elena, who is an associate professor at Bocconi University, specializing in administrative and environmental law, and is also the program director for the Masters of Science of Transformative Sustainability. In addition to Professor Elena, we're pleased to have Veronica Sulo, who is an international recruitment manager at Bocconi, who knows how to identify top talent around the world, having worked in graduate recruitment and admissions since 2001. And before we get started with Professor Elena's masterclass, I'd like to first invite you to tell us a little bit more through the poll on our topic today. So we've launched the poll here. You can see it popping up on your screen. And although I would say everyone, the right answer is everyone should be involved in driving the green transition, but who is going to take the lead, or who should be taking the lead? If you could answer whether you think it's governments and public institutions, if it's multinational corporations, perhaps international organizations like the UN or EU, or maybe society and consumers. So let us know who you think should be taking the lead. I'm sure we're going to learn a little bit more today about who our expert believes should be leading the charge, but let's first hear from you. So we'll allow a few more moments for you to think about your answer. It's great to see. I also have a few more people joining from new countries. I see Ghana here. Fantastic. Thank you. Now, before we launch the results of the poll, I just wanted to let you know that we're going to be moving from our chat function to Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout the two presentations today, please just look to the bottom of your screen to the Q&A function, and you will be able to ask any question that you have, and we will be answering them at the end as well. So with that, I'm going to ask us to see the results of our poll, and wow, very divided. So we've got the majority of you, or the largest group, saying that it's governments and public institutions that are responsible for taking the lead in that green transition. And then sort of tied are the next three. So very, very interesting. Definitely, it sounds like everyone thinks it's a shared responsibility. And I'm very excited today to invite Professor Elena to tell you a little bit more about herself and also launch into this very interesting topic today. So over to you, Professor Elena. I'll let you share your screen, and we're excited to learn more.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, for this very nice presentation. And thank you all for being here today and for attending this class. I'm just trying to open my screen. Okay. So I think the result of the poll are very interesting because they show in a way the difficulty of deciding who should be responsible, who should lead this green transition that we are seeing around us these days. Now, the title of this masterclass, I think, is quite explicatory. So, because the title, in a way, explains that both public and private bodies may be involved in the green transition. The point is that involving public and private bodies in the green transition is, on the one side, necessary. On the other side, it is also kind of difficult, and thus there are several challenges and several issues that need to be addressed and managed. Now, let's try to understand how this topic could be developed. So I think you all have an idea of what the green transition is. I think one of the main topics that probably each of you has in mind is the climate transition, and in particular the issue of climate change, which has been tackled with various measures since many years now. You probably all know that the global framework on climate change is based on an international agreement, which is the Paris Agreement, that was signed in 2015. And the aim of the Paris Agreement is to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius and ideally to 1.5 Celsius degrees. Now, of course, climate change is not the only topic of the green transition. There are many other topics, but I think it can be, we can take climate change as a good example of how these public and private components may operate in managing the green transition. You probably know that the Paris Agreement is only the last, let's say, the last point of a much more long path that as regarded climate change. I would say that the starting point can be dated back to 1992, to the Rio conference, the so-called Global Summit that took place in Rio de Janeiro. And in that occasion, several international documents were signed among 192 states, and in particular, for what it concerns climate change, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed. You probably know that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is still nowadays the regulatory framework which regulates climate change. And thus we see from this perspective that we do have states, a number of states, 192 states that signed this convention and, let's say, established what could be, what had to be the regulatory framework based on which the subsequent let's say, agreement, such as the Paris Agreement or the previous one, which was the Kyoto Protocol, were based. And thus we see here the important and prominent role of states. We have seen, we know that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is based on several pillars. One important pillar is the idea of responsibilities towards climate change, which are common but differentiated responsibilities. This is one of the main pillars of the agreement. And based on this idea, the United Nations Framework Convention divided the countries of the world in two annexes. So the more developed countries, Annex 1 countries, which were at the time, and when the Kyoto Protocol, which was the first binding agreement on climate change, was signed. Under the Kyoto Protocol, Annex first countries were obliged to reduce their greenhouse gases, whereas the so-called non-annex countries or Annex 2 countries were not obliged to reduce their greenhouse gases. Now, this complex architecture had its reasons, of course. It came also with some concerns, especially because certain developing countries, which are now also some of the biggest and most powerful countries in the world, were at the time excluded from the obligations to reduce greenhouse gases. In any case, what I want to focus on is the fact that the Paris Agreement completely changed the way we look at climate change. And you probably have heard a few times that the Paris Agreement is a voluntary agreement. And by listening that the Paris Agreement is a voluntary agreement, you may have had the doubt that the Paris Agreement is something which is not effective, because something which is voluntary may create some issues. In fact, the point is that the states of the world realized that it was in a way useless to agree on a climate agreement which was binding, since having something which is binding in climate change regulation is something which then may be difficult to enforce. No? So the point is how you oblige states to stick to the agreement. Well, the point is that the idea when the Paris Agreement was signed was that, in fact, member states should be left free to decide to what extent they could commit themselves to reduce greenhouse gases. And also, the international community wanted to avoid what had happened with the Kyoto Protocol, which was the previous agreement, that member states at some point, since some member states, for instance, Canada, at some point simply decided to withdraw from the agreement because they were not able to respect the agreement anymore. So they were not able to be compliant with the goal that the international community had set for each member state. And thus, what we see with the Paris Agreement is a shift, no? Is a shift in the idea. So on the one side, it is not anymore the international community which establishes the goal for each state, but it is each state which establishes its own goal in order to combat climate change. Second point, the agreement is non-binding, meaning that member states will not be sanctioned if they do not reach the, let's say, the goal, the threshold that they have set by themselves, that they have commit to achieve. And thus we had a shift from what is called a top-down approach, where the international community was deciding everything for each member state, to a different approach, which is a bottom-up approach, where each member state decides for itself by submitting what are called nationally determined contributions, NDCs, where each member state establishes what it can do. The idea that a member state is not sanctioned if is not able, for various reasons, to reach the goal which has set by himself is again based on the idea that what we want to achieve is not that member states simply withdraw from the agreement if they are not able to reach the goals that they have set, but the idea is that we should try as much as possible to keep countries on track, no? And thus, in order to avoid what happened with Canada, we simply withdrew from the Kyoto Protocol in order to, since it was not able to respect the protocol, and it didn't want to face the huge sanctions that the international community had set in case of non-compliance, simply withdrew. Now the approach is different, and the Paris Agreement is about pushing states to communicate if they are not able to reach certain thresholds, certain goals, and thus the international community can intervene and can, let's say, provide some kind of support in economic terms, but also in terms of capacity building, in terms of knowledge, and so to make sure that member states who are not able to reach the goal that they have set for themselves can be kept, let's say, on track. Now, I think the example of the climate change is interesting because it shows that at the beginning of this process, we had mainly states. From 1992 to the Paris Agreement in 2015, of course, the idea and the architecture behind the fight against climate change has changed quite a lot. And I have made the example of what happened from the Paris Agreement, from the Kyoto Protocol to the Paris Agreement. But I think that more in general, what we see is that as I said, the climate change is just an example. We also have many other aspects. But for instance, of course, the idea of circular economy, the idea of clean and green energy in general, as well as you know, the idea that the green transition will have some social impacts, and it needs to be a just transition as well, since in the decarbonization process, many activities and many people who work in certain sectors will need to reconvert themselves and be able to tackle the new challenges in terms of new knowledge and in general competencies in a new work environment. Now, the role of states, of public institutions, is obviously very relevant. In the pool at the beginning of this masterclass, you also saw that there was the possibility to indicate some international supranational bodies, such as NGOs, such as, if you think also in a way, the European Commission or the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change that is within the United Nations. So the importance of government, it is without any doubt. But also consider that international institutions, states and governments, public bodies in general are relevant at international level as well as at local level, because for again, the example of climate change is particularly significant, but the same can be said for every other environmental issue. What we see is that very often it is necessary to have a coordinated action at international, transnational level, but then it is also necessary to have strong local governments who are able to, let's say, enforce these actions and international decisions that have been adopted at international level. And local governments very often are better placed, in a better position, since they are more in contact with the communities and with the problems of the communities, and thus very often the major issues, in fact, are experienced at local level. Now, the fact that we have a lot of institutions, public institutions in the fight against climate change and in the green transition does not mean that there is not role also for private parties, for private bodies. Now, you probably all know that, again, if we take the example of climate change, you probably know that each year there is a so-called COP, no? The Conference of the Parties. This year will be in Belém, in Brazil, in November. And the Conference of the Parties is a meeting which takes place every year of the parties who have signed the original United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in 1992. So the idea is to assess the progresses made by the international community towards climate change. And what I think is interesting is to notice that in the last years, the participation of private entities to this conference of the parties has increased a lot. And the reason why it has increased is that also the role of private bodies in the fight of climate change, but also more in general in the green transition, has raised quite a lot. You probably all know that in recent times we have seen investors as well as regulators all over the world, employees, and in general the public opinion, which has increasingly asked the companies to manage their environmental and social impact. So especially multinational corporations have been asked, let's say, to step in and to have a role and to do something in order to manage the green transition, in order to, let's say, also take responsibility, we can say, to save the planet. And of course, the global pandemic, but also racial injustice and rising income inequality that we see all over the world have heightened the demands for capitalism to take account not only of the interest of corporations, understood as the interest of the shareholders of a corporation, but to take into account of the interest of stakeholders. Of course, the point is how to meet this growing demand. So how to make sure that also the private world, which are, especially in this context, multinational corporations, can take part to this green transition. And I'm sure that some of you have probably heard already of what is called the shift from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. That is the idea that corporations should pursue not only the interest of their shareholders, but also the interest of the communities where they operate, the interest of the workers, and in general the interest of the people that have contributed to make the corporation what it is, and the community in general, which made it possible for the corporation to grow and to expand. Now, of course, this idea creates several issues, which I'm not going to talk about, but for sure, what we can say is that, let's say, the discussion about the role of a corporation and whether a corporation can be held accountable, can be considered to be able to act in a first line in the green transition is not something new, is not a question which has raised only recently. It is significantly that since 1970 we had an economist, Milton Friedman, that published several papers on in particular one work which is very famous that was titled "The Social Responsibility of Businesses to Increase Its Profits." No? And the fact that Milton Friedman in 1970 published an article on this topic by reaffirming that the only possible responsibility for a business was to increase its profit demonstrates demonstrates and in a way shows that even at that time the debate was open, regarding the role of a corporation, regarding the possibility for corporations to be held responsible for, let's say, not only for the damages to the environment, but also to be them in the first line to tackle environmental issues. Now, of course, we all know that applying this theory, so the idea that corporations should also pursue social, environmental goals and not only for-profit goals, has many issues. From the legal perspective, the point is that the majority of laws in each jurisdiction are still based on the idea that the main corporate purpose is to make profits. Now, then, of course, the point we can discuss whether it is possible for a corporation not to maximize profits, but just to make profits. And of course, there is a difference also in this point. But we have seen in recent years a more what is called a stakeholder-oriented approach, which means that, for instance, in several European states, but also in non-European states, we have seen civil code, corporate codes that have started to, let's say, introduce the idea that corporations should have also other interests apart from making profits. Very often, these kind of laws or these kind of ideas have been inserted in not in hard law instruments, but in, for instance, codes of corporate governance, which are non-binding instruments that corporations voluntarily join within a given jurisdiction. But still, this demonstrates in a way the importance of the topic and the tentative of the legal community to find a solution for this issue. It is interesting also to consider that even before Milton Friedman and at the beginning of the 20th century, even the Supreme, I mean, in the United States, the idea of the purpose of a corporation was discussed. And there is a very famous case which was decided in 1919 by the Michigan Supreme Court, and which regarded the famous entrepreneur Henry Ford. Henry Ford at that time, he was, his company was already quite famous, and in particular at that time he had started to produce the Model T, which was let's say the flagship car at that time. Everyone wanted that car, and thus let's say the profits of the Ford Motor Company increased a lot at that time. And because of that, it happened that Mr. Ford wanted to, let's say, to reinvest the profits made by the Ford Motor Company in the company itself. He said, in order to employ still more men, to spread the benefits of these industrial systems to the greatest possible number, to help the people to build up their lives, their homes, and so forth. Of course, behind this idea of, let's say, of capitalism, which was already oriented towards social values, towards, let's say, more, the values of the community, created some issues even at that time. And it happened that two shareholders that were the Dodge brothers at that time challenged the decision of Mr. Ford because they wanted Mr. Ford to, let's say, to distribute the profits, of the incredible profits made by the corporation among shareholders. And so they appealed the decision, and the decision was decided by the Michigan Supreme Court that at that time acknowledged the reasons of the Dodge brothers by saying that the purpose of a corporation basically is to make profits, and that these profits need to be divided among shareholders, and that directors of a corporation may have some discretion to exercise and to decide what means to use in order to attain this end, which is the end to make profits, but they cannot decide not to distribute profit among shareholders. Now, I think these cases that I have mentioned are just some examples that make you understand that in fact this idea, and so the topic of what could be the role of public bodies, what could be the role of private bodies in protecting the environment has been very much discussed over the year, and it is not something new that we see nowadays. And I would say more that very often you probably have heard this expression, the expression the twin transition, no? And which means that the transition, for instance, in the documents of the European Union, this wording is very much used, no? And the idea is that the transition should be on the one side a green transition, but at the same time it should be also a technological transition, since we cannot avoid also a technological transition. And thus, I think it is interesting to see, I'm a lawyer, and thus I have, of course, a legal perspective. I think it is interesting to see that in some documents that have been adopted by the European Union quite recently, we see a similar approach which is used towards private bodies, understood as private corporations. So if you look at, for instance, two flagship pieces of regulation adopted by the European Union, which is on the one side the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which is a directive which obliges corporations to take care and to make sure that human rights and the protection of the environment are ensured throughout their value chain. So if you look at this piece of regulation, and if you look at another flagship regulation, which is the Digital Service Act in the context of new technologies, and it is about the role of hosting providers, and in particular with some specific roles which is played by the big platforms. You notice that these private bodies, so the multinational corporations in the corporate sustainability due diligence, the huge platforms in the Digital Service Act, are in a way required to perform certain functions which have been performed so far by public bodies. And thus I think it is interesting, this shift from the public world to the private realm, which demonstrates one more on the one side how this topic is relevant nowadays, and on the other side it demonstrates that we have to find a way to make the private world working together with the public world in order to address the big challenges of our time. And this for at least one reason, but I could mention many reasons, but there is at least one reason, that is that for economic reasons, so in terms of financial capacity, but also in terms of knowledge, very often private bodies have more knowledge than public bodies, and thus they may be in a better position than public bodies when it comes to regulate, or when it comes to address certain issues which are related, for instance, to the protection of the environment and the green transition, or to the technological transition. And thus I think one of the challenges that the students of tomorrow, and including you, will have to face is how to make sure that private bodies, when perform public functions, when they are involved significantly in addressing these fundamental issues for humankind, exercise their function in a way which is fair, which is guided by principles of impartiality, by principles of fairness, by principles of equality, and so forth. And so to make sure that this does not create further inequalities, does not create further and even bigger issues for the entire humankind. So I really thank you for the attention, and of course I remain available here for in case of questions or comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Elena. That was very interesting and very topical. I love how you highlighted that shift in business from the shareholder model to the stakeholder model, and some great examples on how we all roles share in that responsibility. And you know, hopefully you'll have some great scholars that join you in helping to address these very big challenges. And I know we have some questions that we'll be answering a little bit later live for you as well. So thank you so much. And before I move to our next speaker, I wanted to put the second poll up and ask you to tell us a little bit more about what you're looking for when choosing a university for your master's. So maybe it's multiple things, but perhaps your most important factor is the quality of faculty and research. Perhaps it's opportunities for employment and internships. Maybe it's campus culture and diversity. I see a beautiful campus also behind our next speaker, Veronica Sulo, and very great. And also location and lifestyle. Very relevant as well. So let's hear from you on what is important to you in choosing a university. And then I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker, Veronica Sulo, who I introduced at the beginning, but for those of you that joined us a little later, she is the International Recruitment Manager at Bocconi, and will be telling you a little bit more about Bocconi University, its fantastic programs, and some of the admissions information should you choose to join at Bocconi or apply to join a program. So we'll wait a moment or two more and then we'll close our poll. And again, please keep those questions coming in the question and answer module. We will be able to address those at the end. Okay, so we'll finish our poll and see what matters most for you. Okay, so opportunities for internships and employment. Definitely a career focus is important when selecting a master's degree. We've got a close second for the quality of faculty and research. We can see Bocconi certainly has quality faculty members addressing some of the world's most challenging issues today. And I mean, of course, campus culture and diversity, beautiful Milan. I will turn it over next to Veronica to tell us a little bit more about Bocconi. Thank you. Well, I think you're on mute there. There we go.
Yes, here I am. Welcome everybody also from my side and from Milano, as you can see in the photos. I will give a brief introduction about Bocconi University, pointing out some of the features that you highlighted in the poll, and maybe I'll ask a question to Professor Allena related to internship and job opportunities a bit later. So Bocconi, for those of you who don't know about this university, it's a business school located in Milano, Italy. It's quite of a young university for Italy. Its foundation dates back 1902, so it's a bit more than 120 years, considering that the oldest university in Europe is Bologna, 200 kilometers south of Milano, that dates back 1088, so basically 1000 years. As you can understand, in Italy and Europe, education is a tradition, and especially giving the chance to young students to learn is our duty, also in terms of government and scholarship, that I will talk in a minute. Bocconi at the moment hosts almost 6,000 students, more than 5,000 are international students, and if you seek diversity, yes, we have 120 nationalities represented on campus. This year at bachelor level, we reached 62% of international students. Generally speaking, in all our type of programs, bachelor, master's, PhD, we have more than 50% of students from abroad. India is very much represented. I saw students from Kenya and Ghana. It's growing, but still we would like to welcome more students from the African continent. Bocconi is recognized as a top business schools all over the world. You can see it in the rankings, especially for business, finance, economics, marketing, but not only. Bocconi is a research university, and we are very proud that we are the first university that gets the majority of the European research grants that the European community gives to fund research projects in all the European universities. And the European Union is funding 36 projects at the moment. So if you attend a master at Bocconi, for sure you will be recognized also in terms of companies into the job world. But let's start with the...
I think we briefly lost Veronica there. I think what we'll do is we've got some fantastic questions for Professor Elena. So we're going to go ahead and answer some of those. So I'm just going to read them out for you, Professor Elena. I know we spoke a lot about the green transition and the various responsibilities, but one particular question from Ratika was, how can we focus on green transition when a lot of businesses in this world are damaging, are causing climate change and damage, and business owners may not be able to help because they first see their profit, then climate.
This is exactly the point. No, this was exactly the challenge that I expressed in my lecture. So what the international community is trying to do nowadays, and believe me, there is a big effort from researchers and in general from people all over the world, including entrepreneurials and politicians, to find a way to make private bodies responsible, no, and to find a way to involve private bodies, not just because they have to comply with certain specific laws, but to make sure that there are mechanisms which in a way make sure that these bodies can perform also certain functions which are of interest for the society in a way which is fair, which does not create additional inequalities and so forth. Of course, the answer is not easy, and I mean the topic is really highly investigated, and there is a big effort toward this goal. So your question exactly touches the point.
Great. And I see Veronica has joined us back. And just before we pass it back for her to share her screen and continue on.
Yes, I'm sorry, there was a glitch.
No worries, no worries. We've just taken the opportunity to answer some of the great questions. I think we'll take one more as you set up your screen again.
Absolutely.
Jean-Baptiste does speak to something that you did cover a bit, and perhaps you can elaborate a little bit more, Professor Elena. My country, Canada, did withdraw because it didn't comply, and we went through that in the presentation, and yet it's still affecting our environment. What are the international organizations to do with those structures and making countries and a little bit more accountable for their goals?
Well, actually, after the episode of Canada, what happened is that the international community realized that this kind of mandatory top-down international agreements did not work. And it is for that reason that the international community shifted and decided to adopt the Paris Agreement, which is instead based on a different philosophy, which is the voluntary philosophy, even though it may seem in a way a weaker agreement. In fact, it is just the result of the international community realizing that a mandatory international agreement is impossible to enforce at international level, because there is no way to oblige Canada or any other country to stay in the agreement. And thus it is much better if countries voluntarily decide to stay in the agreement, because they committed to do something and they are able to reach the goals. If they are not able, they should ask for support to the international community. So this is exactly the philosophy behind the agreement.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it back to Veronica to continue to hear a little bit more about Bocconi and the various programs. And I see there's lots of interest in the types of programs that Bocconi has as well. So over to you,
Thank you so
Veronica.
much. I'm very sorry. I was talking about, yes, our recognition abroad, but let's delve into two more features. One is our international network. We partner with plenty of very prestigious business schools all over the world. The program that Professor Allena is directing is actually double degree with the Polytechnic of Milano, which is one of the best engineering schools in Europe. But you can see the world turns around and you can do double degrees and exchange and enhance your study abroad experiences, not only in Italy, not only in Europe, but also with an experience worldwide. The other very important point and feature of Bocconi University is its relationships with the job world. We have more than 4,000 employers, companies that offer more than 11,000 placement and internship offers to our students. We organize Bocconi Jobs fairs, like in the photo that you can see here, not only in Milano, but in Paris, Frankfurt, Brussels, and London. The whole European continent opens up for you. Also thanks to our alumni who work worldwide in some of the best companies and institutions in the world, as you can see here. Statistics tells us that almost everyone has a full-time job 1 year after graduation. Actually, 80% of our students have a full-time offer by the time of the graduation day. Even this 36% of students working abroad is not the total of our students working abroad. If you look on our website at the Master in Finance or International Management or even Politics, you will see that more than 60% of our students work abroad. What I wanted to ask Professor Allena is an example of our partnerships with companies. I know some students from her program also did internships with the Kering Group, the fashion luxury group. So maybe, Professor, you want to say something related to the contacts with the business world for your program.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Well, of course, at Bocconi we have a strong tradition of working together with the business community in general, and so we have a lot of companies who are partners of our programs, which means that students have the opportunity to conduct internships, both like extended, I mean, a long time internship and also brief, let's say, internship of 1 week and a short period, let's say, to these companies to see how the company works, to be directly involved in the everyday working activities. And then, of course, what we usually see in our courses, especially at in the master courses, is that very often our professors, including myself, invite the the, for instance, head of departments of these corporations to in class in order to bring their own experience. And this is usually something which the students really like, because they have the opportunity to get to know better by seeing, you know, someone who is actually working on what they are studying. And so I think this is a nice way to get in touch with the business world. So I can say that Bocconi contributes a lot with human capital to the also to several important corporations.
Thank you, Professor Allena. So Professor Allena is actually directing the program that you can see here in the STEM area, the Transformative Sustainability Master. We have several masters in the area of management, of finance, of economics, of data science and artificial intelligence, and also a new Master of Science in Law. What's more important, that it's one of that to answer one of your questions in the poll, is that first of all, we have a compulsory internship. It is our priority from day one of the master program to let you meet with a career coach, a career account specific for the program, specific for the industry, that sits down with you and try to shape your profile. What can be the exact profile that the job industry needs now, today, and even tomorrow when you graduate. And as Professor Allena was saying, we try to do everything even in a holistic way. So not only classes, lecture and courses, but meetings with companies, in-company training. So we bring you into companies, compulsory internship, electives, study abroads, the perfect profile that the specific industry is looking for. You can see that besides compulsory courses, electives, majors, study abroad, you also have 2 foreign languages. So you will study some Italian language, first of all, to enjoy beautiful Italy and Milano, but also to show future employers that you made an effort to get out of your comfort zone, get infused in the local culture. And this is something all type of employers are looking for, that you are smart, you're able to work with people from different cultures. And this is again something that during the course you will be required to do, right, Professor Allena, to work a lot in groups, to do group works, research projects, and to make sure that you are infused also by different cultures. Let's talk a little bit about admission process when you can apply to Bocconi Masters in several rounds. The first one is starting today, and the first deadline is in November, where you get your admission results by Christmas time, or January, March, April. You can apply 2 times in a year, so my suggestion is try to apply by January to be to have time to apply a second time eventually. When you apply, you can apply at the same time to 5 programs. So you've seen, sorry, go back just a second. We have a long list in the management area or in the STEM area. So you can apply 4 more programs, making sure your personal statement, your letter of motivation, which is addressed to the program director, reflects what are your interests, why Bocconi can be a valuable support to help you achieve your dream job, your goals, whatever activity you would like to do in the future. We evaluate students on several elements. Some are quantitative, that is to say your GPA and a test. You can do GMAT or GRE, that is, I think, quite popular in India, but you can also do a Bocconi test online. You can book it tonight and do it tomorrow from home. Okay. When you submit your application, you are automatically evaluated for merit scholarships. So work well on your GPA, on your test, on your letter, and on your CV, because the professor, right, Professor Allena, will also evaluate your profile, and if they deem you a very interesting profile for their class, they might help you get a merit award. Am I right, Miriam?
Yes, yes, you are definitely right.
We also have special women scholarships for female students admitted in the finance or in the STEM programs, because the industry is asking us for more female employees, and so we try to support what the job market is looking for. The merit-based scholarship, you don't need to apply for them. You need to work well on the application, and you may get it together with admission results. A nice surprise. In case you don't get a merit scholarship, you can still apply for need-based scholarships. A few more information about our beautiful campus in the city center of Milan, in the north of Italy. Milan hosts 8 universities, so we have plenty of students from all over the world in town, but it is also not only a fashion capital, but the financial hub of Italy. Consider that the Italian Stock Exchange is based in Milan, which is not the capital of Italy, which is Rome. So Milan is really the business capital of Italy. Rome is more administrative capital of Italy, I would say. And so you will find plenty of multinational companies, even in Milano, where you can start entering the job world, doing internship, and so on. Milano will also host the Winter Olympics in 2026 in February. So by the time some of you might come in September, the Olympics will be over, but we are building a lot of residence halls and the Olympic Village to make sure for the athletes, and it's walking distance from this campus. This means that in next year we will have more residence halls for all our students. Here you can see a quick map of the blue are all our teaching buildings, and the whites are all the residence halls. So we have plenty of spaces for all our students, especially international students that need a safer location, especially at the beginning. The campus is very lively, with also an amazing sports center, student associations, cultural events. Every day there's something going on in our campus. I was talking to my colleagues at the career service yesterday. They had a breakfast at 8 a.m. open to students with McKinsey consulting managers, just as a networking, to talk and discuss with students what can be their opportunities to work and have internship there. Quick breakfast before classes starts to again help you connect with the business world. I'm almost done with the main features of Bocconi. Here you can find our email address, the website, and also the Meet Bocconi Instagram account that you can follow. But I will be happy to answer all your questions together with Professor Allena.
Many thanks, Veronica. So many exciting programs at Bocconi, and some great questions that have been answered in the chat. I'm going to pose one more to Professor Allena around the integration of ESG in corporations. Implementing ESG holistically and strategically is challenging due to a lack of clear guidance. Organizations struggle with both the substantive aspects, what's required, and the procedural aspects, how to achieve it. How can we move from discussion to implementation?
Thank you, Veronica. Well, this is a very interesting question, as I have to say, as all the questions. So, of course, this is something that you probably will learn, and in part you have already learned at the university. It is difficult to provide answers to these questions. What we can do is actually to try to better understand the problems, and also to find out some new ideas in order to address these really important challenges for humankind. The way, I mean, I think I briefly mentioned that during my presentation, there are a lot of challenges actually to overcome. And I think it is important that the young generations like you are willing to take the lead in this path, because it is not easy, and notwithstanding that, we need to take action and we need to do something. So I think the international community, the private worlds, the research world, the NGOs, I mean, all these, let's say, constituencies are actually doing something in the right direction, even though, of course, we have stop and goes. This is typical of each transition, and also the green transition. We have stop and goes, so we don't have a linear transition which only progresses. The point is that we are running behind deadlines, and the time is, the time is, we are always running. So we have to work on that, definitely. But unfortunately, I do not have clear answers to that question.
Great, thank you. It's certainly a big challenge that involves a lot of different stakeholders, and you did a great job of outlining all of the people that are involved in that process. I see a question. We'll do one more question here from Hannah. Can we speak a little bit, Veronica or Professor Elena, to the alumni engagement at Bocconi and how they support students?
Veronica, do you want to go ahead?
As you like, if you want to say something, otherwise.
Well, Veronica may have a more technical, let's say, knowledge of this, but what I can say is that we have several events which I participate very often with students and alumni, and so the community of alumni tend to be a strong community, a good chance again for our students to get to know the real world, a good chance for alumni to stay in touch with youngest generations. So I think it's one of the most interesting programs actually at Bocconi.
Yes, I would definitely agree. Consider that there is a mentorship program dedicated to alumni. And when you are a Bocconi alumnus, you are a Bocconi alumnus for the rest of your life. So whenever you need some help or support to grow with your career, to change the industry, to make a step out of your comfort zone, you will also will always find Bocconi helping you. The mentorship program is really one-to-one, where senior alumni can mentor younger ones, but also, for example, in 2 weeks, we will have an alumni homecoming with thousands of alumni coming to our campus to let's say experience something that maybe they didn't see it before, like the new area of the campus, but again to engage within our current students community. Alumni also help us a lot in finding internship opportunities, because they are often in very high positions in industries like Goldman Sachs for finance, or institutions like the European Central Bank, but also private corporations like, I don't know, Procter & Gamble, or other product companies, or Kering, as we mentioned before. You probably know that among now the CEO of Kering Group is a Bocconi alumnus, Luca De Meo. The CEO and president of Saint Laurent, the fashion company, is a Bocconi alumnus, Francesca Bellettini, who graduated in finance. And so we have several very good alumni who are very happy to work with us and with younger students to, let's say, smooth the path into career.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So much engagement and impressive alumni, and a really wide host of master's programs available to all of you. I see some questions on specific masters, and I think there is a great slide you will see in the recording from Veronica and all of the suite of master's programs. You can also visit their website to look more into these career opportunities, the scholarships. We've also shared a link in the chat on the scholarships that Bocconi is doing with SEED as well. So lots of amazing opportunities, both on the funding side and the career element, and a vibrant alumni community as well. So I just want to close it out and thank everyone for joining us from around the world today. And a big thank you to our two speakers from Bocconi University, Veronica for telling us more about Bocconi, and Professor Elena for really allowing us to learn a lot more about the space and the governance around the green economy, and hopefully you can join as a student and push that forward and really advance what is quite an important topic, perhaps in that space, or maybe one of the other incredible programs that is offered by Bocconi. So thank you so much on behalf of SEED Global Education for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon in another event. Thank you so much.
And see you in Milano, maybe.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Everyone.
Ciao.
Bye.